Hello and welcome to The Progress Theory, where we discuss scientific principles for optimising human performance. I'm Dr. Eilidh Prise, and on today's episode we're joined by Celtman and Norseman champion, Eilidh Prise. Now, extreme triathlons like the Celtman and the Norseman are getting more and more popular, so it's a real privilege to have on The Progress Theory someone that has won both. On this episode, Eilidh discusses how she's incorporated her training into a lifestyle that she absolutely loves, and also discusses how she deals with that cold. As always, follow The Progress Theory on Instagram, YouTube, and check out all of our other episodes. Here is Eilidh Prise. Welcome, Eilidh. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's so great to have you on. I know a few friends that have done certain races that you've done very well in, and I wanted to know a lot more as to like the training and the desire behind doing these particular challenges. So it's great to have you on the podcast. I think you're the perfect guest, and I can't wait to ask you a few questions about your training and the history behind what you got into these types of sports.
Excellent. Ask away. This is the time.
Oh, brilliant. Well, to start it all up, do you want to give a bit of an overview to who you are?
Yes, I can do that. My name is Eilidh Prise. I'm 27 from Scotland, and I quite like running and cycling and being out in the mountains. Cold water swimming is okay too, but really I just like getting outside and making the most of the day. And it's led to doing some quite cool events recently, which has been a nice bonus, I think, on top of everything.
What got you into, is it purely you just like being outside and, it just led you to do some more running, some cycling, and it was just the fact you just wanted to be outside that sort of drove you towards, actually, why don't I try and compete in something that involved these kind of sports?
I think there were a few kind of things that led to me getting into hill running and the events such as the Celtman and the Norseman. I used to be a modern pentathlete, which is a sport which involves running, swimming, shooting, horse riding, and fencing. And I used to, first of all, compete for Great Britain and then Ireland later on. My mum's Irish, so I jumped ship at one point. And I competed in World Championship events, European events, the test event for the Olympic Games in Tokyo, and my whole entire focus whilst being at university and studying was that I wanted to go to the Olympics, and going to the Olympics was this amazing dream that I always had. So I was always very focused and maybe had that typical elite athlete mindset. And then it got to 2019 and I actually realized I had a bit of a challenging year. I struggled with some injuries. I didn't perform as well as I thought I should have or could have. And I decided that actually I don't want to go to the Olympics necessarily. It just wasn't that dream that it had always been. Which was quite a scary realization when it's something that's so huge that has always driven you from day to day, and then you one day wake up and you hang on a minute, that I don't necessarily want that anymore. So I managed to get an internship to work for Adidas, and then I started applying for some jobs, not really knowing where anything would take me, and then that funny thing, COVID, happened, and my dad was actually training for Celtman at the time. And I started joining him on some cycles, and I was using my sister's bike. And my parents and my sisters are very outdoorsy, and my sisters are very good hill runners. And I had always seen them doing this weird thing, running in the hills. I think, why would anyone want to do that? It's so painful. But then I realized that it was such a nice way to get outside that avoids this lap checking or consistent checking of how fast you're going or pace you're going, which I had been so used to prior to that. So I started in kind of embracing this hill running and then thinking, you can actually walk here and it still counts as hill running. This is brilliant. And I ended up buying a gravel bike because I was accompanying my dad quite regularly, and my sister got a bit annoyed that I kept on using her bike and said, hang on, it's about time you bought your own bike. And then one thing just led to another. I carried on joining my dad on his training rides. The smaller hills turned into bigger hills. Things started to open up, so we were able to travel more across Scotland to the Munros. I bought a van. Perfect. I can sleep at the bottom of this mountain and then run up first thing in the morning. And my whole lifestyle just changed. And then I tried to get into Celtman in November 2021 because I had been training with my dad, and he's very passionate about Celtman because my oldest sister, Siobhan, she actually won Celtman in 2016. So it'd always been his dream, actually, after watching her do it, to think, can I do that? And then I really just jumped on his dream. Didn't get into Celtman in November 2021, but carried on just enjoying the training process, still joining Dad, and then they opened up some slots 7 weeks before the event in 21, and luckily I was fit enough and I got one of those slots, and kind of since then one thing just led to another, and I would say a bit of a whirlwind past 2 or 3 years. Not really expected. I would be quite surprised now, or definitely after Norseman last year, if you'd have told me that would be the outcome 2 years ago.
That's an incredible story. Is your dad still training for the Celtman?
So Dad did Celtman in 2021 and he did great. He had a fantastic day. And then last year he did the Celtman solo, which is the shorter Celtman. And he did the Celtman short this year. Last year he did Swissman, which is another extreme triathlon based in Switzerland. And I supported him at that. I don't know how I could have forgotten about it because it was quite an experience because he actually did it having COVID. So I went out to support with my mum. And after that, my mum said, Gavin, you are never doing a full distance Ironman triathlon again. That's it. You have to do the shorter ones. I think she was a bit worried about him doing this crazy event and having COVID and whatnot. But he's still we still cycle together and not so much run together. But he's still a big part of kind of both my parents are. My whole family are a big part of this lifestyle that I guess I now have.
Yeah, that's a really, really impressive family. It's a big CV. Now, it's really cool to hear your story, leading from your dream to be at the Olympics. And then you kind of changed direction. Because you hear a lot of stories about a lot of athletes sometimes struggle when they've spent so many years going towards a particular goal, and then all of a sudden something might happen, they go a different direction. But it sounds like your direction just came with like a change of lifestyle that you just embraced with your family. And do you think that made that transition so much easier?
Totally. It made it so much easier because I never actually had the goal. Winning Celtman wasn't ever a goal. Winning Norseman wasn't ever a goal. So it was just, I was able to enjoy the day-to-day journey and building on one thing to the other, and it was all new and getting better at cycling and seeing improvements. It was so fresh and exciting, and to be honest, it was really just taking things one step at a time that made me, I don't know, now I look back, I think that's, if I had that attitude when I was an elite athlete, rather than always really focusing on that end goal, then maybe I could have reached more of a potential. So it's quite an interesting thing when you think about the mindset shift from one sport to the other that I had. Yeah,
because I know, especially in the sort of social media space, people want to know about the mindset of, people that are high elite athletes because they want to impart some of that mindset onto themselves to actually improve. But it sounds like you wish like, oh, I wish I actually had this type of mindset that I've got from post training for the Olympics. I might have done a little better or a little differently in modern pentathlon. So it's an interesting dynamic there. It kind of goes against the grain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we often see elite athletes or people who are performing in the highest level at whatever it is that they do. We think that, wow, that must be 100% focus on that goal all the time. But really, I think that mindset, for me personally, is detrimental and it's not healthy. And I think that for me, and probably for a lot of people, a mindset where you're, say, 85, 90% focused on something, but there's still 10, 15, maybe 20% for you to do something else. And it just, it means that you don't lose passion, you don't lose commitment. The discipline is easy because you're not selling yourself every single day, and you don't always have to get the best ounce of yourself. We see this on social media, oh, I'm so exhausted. I did this, I did that, and now I have nothing left. The tank is empty. My attitude is always leave a bit for the next day. You never know what's coming the next day. So I never really want to empty my tank, whether it be with work or with sport or anything. I think having a good balance where you're always leaving just a little bit, it helps longevity. For me, I found that definitely.
Yeah. Really nice philosophy of life in a way. It's weird how, like you say about social media, a lot of people try and glorify, oh, this was a good workout, and all of a sudden someone's in a sweaty mess on the floor. And, that is the personification of effort, because that's what everyone should do, because look at how much effort you put into. You didn't have any more ounces to give, when really that might be good in a singular point, but if you try and expand that to a whole training year or even like an Olympic cycle, it just adds up to the point where you just start to almost break down. So, and that comes physically, mentally, all sorts, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think don't get me wrong, sometimes you do have to empty the tank, sometimes that is required, but if you can't train or do it the day after, then what did it count? I think consistency is so important and it's so underrated. That's the thing that will always beat out these unstoppable hard efforts.
So before your first Celtman, how many hours will you spend running? How many hours will you spend on the bike? How many hours will you spend open water swimming? What kind of training what did your training look like leading up to your first one?
So leading up to the first Celtman, the swimming pools were closed for a lot of that period.
Of course,
so I think the pools only opened like 6 weeks before. But I'm in a very fortunate position in that I did a lot of swimming when I was doing pentathlon. So I had the swimming background. So it was never really something that I worried about or I did a huge amount. Maybe I did once or twice a week when the pools opened. But the most important thing with the swimming was just getting into some cold water and doing some cold water dips. And it wasn't never swimming for an hour in cold water. It would be like 15 or 20 minutes, but just doing it on a regular basis. And every week making sure that I did that. And when you think, oh, I only have to get in for 15, 20 minutes, well, that's easy mentally. But if I had said, oh, I have to go in for an hour, then that would have been much harder, and probably I would have ended up doing less over the course of those 6 weeks. And that's kind of the mentality that I'd had with everything. I tried to make it manageable so it fits within my work, but also, I can do it mentally. It's not too taxing. So cycling, I did a lot of work on the turbo trainer in the 2020-2021 winter, and it was the first time I'd ever done a winter of cycling because I had only started riding a bike in 2020. And to be honest, I would just pick, I had days where I tried to do some sessions on the bike and I would just pick a random Zwift session or see if I had finished work, if there was a group workout that kind of suited what I felt on that day. Oh, well, I'll just do that one. And then with the running, I did a lot of hill running. So the majority of my running was on hills, and leading up to Celtman itself, even more more and more of it was just on the hills and long days out on feet. So I think my longest training weeks were maybe around 18 hours, but actually through the winter, I was probably averaging 12 to 15. So not really a huge amount. There were some very big weeks leading into Celtman, but the main thing was I was very consistent over a period of time. So there was no weeks where I had minimal training. It was always I was always able to put the weeks back to back.
How did you find the transition to a lot more hill running compared to the running you were doing for your modern pentathlon training?
So in modern pentathlon, it was track sessions and road running and mainly shorter, faster workouts. And I loved the hill running. It was great. You bring a sandwich, you have a nice day on the hill with your friends. You have a chat about life. If I'm on my own, I listen to a podcast, listen to Audible, stop, take some photos. It's great. When it's just about time on feet, it's brilliant. Bring a jam sandwich.
Sounds like a holiday. Perfect.
It is.
It was such a good way of viewing training, because I guess if you didn't view it in such a way like that, it can be harder to do. But it's quite similar to the example you gave regarding the getting into the cold water for like 20 minutes. If it was an hour, that'd be much harder. Well, if you view your, your time on feet as something really fun, because you can do this, that, and the other, all of a sudden you're spending more time on feet, more time just running. That makes you better. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It was what I wanted to be doing on a Saturday morning or when I wasn't working. It was, I guess at that time we still had the kind of COVID hangover, and this had been my COVID thing. And so I was still adjusting to kind of what life looks like when you have a job and you're not doing elite sport. And so this became my release from life. And I still love it. I mean, still, if I don't have any major plans. In fact, most of my plans at the weekends do involve around being on the bike or running up hills, but it's always what I will choose to do. And I think that's one of the key things to doing these events. You really have to love the training. It's such a commitment and dedication, and takes so much time that you really have to want to be doing it. If you're not enjoying going up a hill or being out in fresh air, if that's not something that you enjoy, then I'm not sure you would enjoy the training or the event itself.
No, it's a good message, and it's almost a message to say that if you're not viewing your training in the same way, like what kind of changes could you make, whatever the sport, what changes could you make to try and change your perception of that training? Because the more you enjoy it, the easier it will be, and the more time you'll spend practicing it, and then you'll end up consistently doing it more often, and then you'll end up getting better at it.
Exactly. And I think most people have jobs and busy lives, and training is something that you fit inside or around that. So it's so important that you enjoy it and you find something that you can do that's not too mentally taxing to do. Don't get me wrong, there's still things that sometimes I have to do which I don't like doing some strength and conditioning, which I have been saying I need to get started at for a long time. Next week is the week. I will do it. I will be in the gym. The first time I've been in the gym for years. So there are still things that I don't necessarily enjoy, but I always enjoy after it. And sometimes you just have to suck it up and get on with it. It's not all as easy as sometimes maybe I can make it sound.
You're saying how you try and fit training around work. Do you work like 9 to 5, or do you have a bit of flexibility with work so you can actually fit your training in a different way into the week?
Yeah, so I have a 9 to 5 job as such, but I'm quite lucky in that there's some flexible working you can work from home some days a week. And then if I don't have meetings, then I can go for a run, or I can try and make my work and training fit together quite well. Sometimes they don't work well. If you have to travel, if you have a busy day, whatnot, sometimes something has to take a priority, and that's just the way it is. But I really try not to let those situations beat myself up or I don't beat myself up when that happens. I just get on with it, and then you reset, and the next day you go again. Sometimes I think it's easy to spiral when you maybe have one or two bad days when you have to have different priorities, or something happens and it comes out of left field and you're a bit stressed and whatnot. And I think it's important to try and put that in a box and be able to wake up the next morning, reset, if you're lucky enough to have dealt with that situation, whatever it was, and start again. And it's back to that consistency thing, right? It's just all about being consistent and finding a routine and a lifestyle that works for you.
Yeah, I can really sympathize with that, because I think I've been guilty in the past of, say, a training day or a few days in a week didn't quite go to plan. Then all of a sudden I'm beating myself up about it, because I'm thinking, you need to be consistent. You've written it down in a certain way. You've structured the week in a certain way. Try and follow it. And if it doesn't go to plan because of outside interference, then you sort of beat yourself up about it. But again, it's that perception of training, isn't it? Like my perception is all of a sudden something's going wrong because I'm out of control, and I need to kind of flip that and say, it doesn't really matter, try this, try that, and then all of a sudden you're back enjoying it rather than resenting it.
Yeah, exactly. And then sometimes you can look back at the end of the week and say Monday, Tuesday, half of Wednesday was a bit of write-off, but you were able to put in great sessions on Thursday, Friday, and something big at the weekend, and you're like, actually, in the end, I managed to pull together something that I didn't think I maybe would have, or might have jeopardized if I had just let the situation spiral.
Yeah. For anyone that doesn't know about the Celtman, anyone listening, could you describe it? So it's obviously an extreme iron distance triathlon, but what makes it extreme?
Oh, everything. So the Celtman is a Ironman distance triathlon. It has a 3.4 kilometer swim in the sea, in the west coast of Scotland. Can be very choppy waters, usually lots of jellyfish and seaweed. Then you have a 200 kilometer bike ride, which is longer than the standard Ironman distance bike ride, which has about 2,000 meters of elevation. But the thing that makes the bike ride very challenging is usually extreme weather conditions, and normally very windy. Although if anybody did the Celtman this year, I don't know what happened, but Scotland almost became Spain for a few days. But can usually have very challenging headwinds, side winds, crosswinds. And then the run, which I think is probably the most memorable or distinctive thing about the Celtman triathlon. It's a marathon, 42 kilometers. I think that's how long a marathon is, with the first half on what is trail, and some of it quite rough trail. And then the second half goes over 2 Munros and a mountain called Benay on the west coast of Scotland, and down some incredibly technical terrain, really rocky, really challenging conditions. The last 8K is on road, which is probably the easiest part of the whole triathlon. However, try running 8K on road after doing everything else before it, and it also feels extremely extreme. So it's mainly, I would say, the weather. But then, of course, it's also the scenery, the trails, the route. Everything about it is pretty extreme and pretty crazy.
Sounds pretty extreme. What did you find hardest? Weather or terrain, or what was the hardest bit?
So the first year I did it in 2021, I found the bike the hardest. I was still relatively new from cycling. I'd never done a cycle that long before. I kept on being sick for some reason. I don't know. I had got the nutrition all wrong. And I thought, oh my goodness, this bike ride is never ending, and I'm never getting on a bike ever after this. And then in 2022, there was very, very challenging weather conditions. And I'm quite lucky in that I guess, thrive in those hard conditions. But it's still very hard. I'm just maybe more used to it than a lot of other people, especially if they come from abroad. And the run is obviously very, very challenging as well. But if you do the training right, then so far for me it's been so good. But who knows? I'm hoping to do it again next year. So I'm sure a shitter of a run is probably what I deserve at some point. Every time you do it, I think it's different, and you have a different experience, and everybody has different experiences that does it.
That must make it much more exciting, because yes, you do everything you can to try and prepare as much as possible for the event. But if there's that element of surprise that you know is coming, and you kind of have to add that to your training, don't you? Because you need to be able to be durable enough to react to whatever might happen. Because, you know, certain changes in weather or anything like that, some people are going, no, that's it for me. That's it, I'm gone. Really good, fit Ironman, but the weather is just too much. Whereas if you are adaptable, you know, that's a really good skill or trainable skill, which I guess if you're regularly training in the hills, do you find that nicely prepares you for any kind of surprises that might happen on those types of events?
Yeah, and I think it really relates to that mentality as well, because you just can't prepare 100% for it because you don't know what the weather conditions will be like. So if you're preparing 80, 90%, well, you're pretty much there. You're doing as much as you can, but you know that there's an element to the unknown. And I think some of the things that I do are maybe seem a bit odd for, you know, getting into the cold water. Some of the places that I went into cold water with my dad, we were in near off Stonehaven, going down some path that you just wouldn't go to at the bottom of this cove, and you're getting in with the seals for 10 or 15 minutes, and you think, there we go, that's fine, that's the training for today, and that's it. It's kind of, what I like about it is you can be quite experimental with training. You can be imaginative and innovative and do these different kind of adventures, I guess, and it still counts as training because it's something new, it's something different, and it's preparing you physically but also mentally to be able to adapt with something different. I do think it is really important to always get out there when the weather is bad, not always, but to have that ability to get on your bike when it's pissing down with rain and you know you're going to get cold and wet. Not every weekend, but sometimes. And then the same with running, to get out there in challenging conditions. Always, of course, staying safe if you're going up hills. But it's definitely something that will give you an edge, a mental advantage on the day.
It's a cool way of seeing, you know, really adverse weather conditions or any type of conditions and just flip it on its head and say, actually, this is slightly a different adventure. And all of a sudden, training becomes an adventure, and then all the hard stuff of that training just becomes part of that adventure. Again, you perceive the training completely different, and that must really help.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing for me. I don't class myself as kind of having an elite mindset or anything like that, and I don't really follow a very structured training regime, because for me it's all about enjoying it. It's all about the adventure. It's all about having fun. It's always about doing something different. And yeah, maybe I'd be able to get, I doubt it, but some people would say, oh, you could probably get 5 or 10% more out of you if you were a bit more focused or a bit more structured. But then I'd lose that aspect that makes it so great, and I don't want to do that. So for me, it's that balance.
No, it's a really interesting way of thinking about it, because if you did sort of make changes to make things more focused, okay, you increase that side, but then you decrease the enjoyment side, and the net gain of improvement from you might actually be lower. So it's it shows how coaching is an art. It isn't all about just being overly structured with science. It's an element of that, and also the element of coaching and making it appropriate for the athlete. I mean, in your case, is you had this way of structuring training that it's fun for you and it works.
Yeah, and I wouldn't like to be my coach. I didn't have a coach when I first started Celtman, and I didn't have a coach for Norseman either. But I have decided this year that I'm going to start working with someone, which will be fun and something new. And good luck to him. He'll need it.
Why is that? Why have you decided for a coach this time?
Because I felt that when I started it, everything was new and everything was fresh. But now so I've just spent the past year working in Norway, and I've had a bit of time out of competing, and I'm still been cycling and running, but not doing so much structure. I didn't do Celtman, I didn't do Norseman this year, and now I've decided I'd like to get back to it, but don't want to have the mindset that I used to have when I was doing elite sport, and I don't want to have this mindset where it's all about comparing myself to how I used to be. I still need to keep it fresh, and I think having someone who is also pretty adventurous himself. He just did a really amazing gravel race called Badlands in Spain, where you ride a gravel bike for like 3 days straight.
Yeah, I think I've heard of that. Yeah.
So having somebody like that in my corner that I can just bounce ideas off and keep things fresh, I think is really going to be helpful this year. Instead of maybe getting in a situation where I'm always looking back at, what was I doing before? What was I doing before? I still want it to be fresh. I still want it to be new. And I don't know how it will be next year, getting back to whatever level I can get back to. Hopefully I'll be able to get back to some similar shape, but who knows? It's not guaranteed. So I think it'll be just great to have somebody there to I don't know, bounce things off. Tell me I'm doing well after a bad week, something like that.
Hype person.
Yeah.
What's the aim for this next Celtman? Because obviously you've won it twice. So yeah, is it to get the trifecta, or is there aspects of the performance that you want to improve?
So I think that it's a really interesting question, and it's actually a question that I've been asking myself a lot recently as well. What is my motivation? What do I want to achieve from this? And what I've realized that it's actually almost got nothing to do with the race itself. It's about proving to myself that I can get back to the same level. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same peak shape, but get back to the same region of where I was before, and enjoy the journey, enjoy the training. I love spring when you've done a hard summer, you've done a hard winter of training, and then the days are getting longer, and you can get out to the mountains, and you're fit, and you just carry that fitness through the summer. And I miss that kind of winter grind and that feeling that you're just pushing yourself just that little bit more on a day-to-day basis, and you're getting the most out of yourself. I really miss that this year. So it's about that. And for me, Celtman is a perfect goal, because all that kind of training that I want to be doing just totally aligns with doing Celtman. So it's not actually, the goal for me is not the race. That's kind of a byproduct of the journey towards the race. No,
that's a really cool way of looking at everything. Really good. A good approach to life and philosophy of training. It's really cool to see. Say if I wanted to do the Celtman, complete average triathlete, what would you recommend I do, whether it's from a training point of view, or how do I qualify for the Celtman?
So the qualification is probably the hardest part. You have to put your name in a ballot, which is coming up very soon, actually. I think it's the 10th of October, maybe. And the ballot is open for 10 days. You put your name in the ballot, and if your name gets pulled out, then you've got a slot, and you can do the race. It's quite competitive to get in. I think there are quite a few people that have been trying for some years and haven't got in. So I think that in itself gives it just an extra edge. It's almost like this exclusive group, once
Members club.
or it's like the golden ticket that you don't know if you want to receive or don't want to receive. And then if you got in, consistency. Find something that fits your lifestyle that you can do on a day-to-day basis. Don't be over-ambitious. Keep it at a base level. Have a base level that you can do. And if there's some weeks where you can maybe do a little bit more, then that's brilliant. But have that base level that you can do week in, week out. And enjoy it. Enjoy the freedom of being able to do different type of training than you would normally get to do if you're doing a standard sanitized Ironman.
Are there any qualification metrics you have to hit to be able to apply for the Celtman? Or is it anyone can? Oh, brilliant.
Anybody can enter.
Excellent.
So we'll be seeing your name in the ballot then in a few weeks' time?
Well, I'll have to check the finances, but maybe I have to check my fitness as well. I might be too far behind at the moment.
No, you can never be too far behind. I'm so far behind as well, but we got 8 months. It's perfect.
8 months. Brilliant. So following on from the Celtman, what's the Norseman?
The Norseman is another extreme distance Ironman triathlon. It is kind of the brother or sister event of the Celtman, and the Swissman is another one of those, which is what my dad did last year. And so the Norseman is 4K or around about 4K, 3.94K swim in a fjord where you jump off a ferry at the start. It's got a very iconic start.
That's class.
They like to say that the fjord is freezing cold. Well, actually, it's not that cold. Or when I did it, it wasn't that cold. I actually got too hot during the swim. Maybe they glorify that a little bit, but don't tell anybody I said that. Then the bike ride, and I think the bike ride makes Norsman so incredibly special. It's absolutely incredible. It's 180 kilometers with 3,000 meters of elevation. And if you're from the UK or Scotland, then you will appreciate the road surface. Oh my Lord, it's incredible. It's so smooth. The tarmac is amazing. And the views are just absolutely incredible. And then the run, which, if I'm honest, is compared to Celtman, is maybe on the dull side. I didn't say that. The first 25K of the Norseman run are on flat road, and then you climb 1,800 meters in the remaining whatever that would be, 17 kilometers, where you climb up a iconic climb called Zombie Hill, which is a switchback road that takes you up to where Winter Ski Resort is. And then it's only the last 5 kilometers which are off-road, and it takes you up to the top of Mount Gaustatoppen, which is the largest mountain in southern Norway. And the view from the top there is absolutely incredible, mind-blowing. It's quite a different event from the Celtman, but it's also I think what makes these events so exciting is actually the people and the buzz around them. Everybody is so excited to be there and to have, the opportunity to do it. They're hard events to get into. Lots of people want to do them, but then have made the start line. You've done the training. You've done all the hard work. You're there, and it's this kind of anticipation and excitement that I think just makes these events so incredibly special.
I guess it takes a certain type of person to, sign up for, an extreme triathlon. So, once all the people are together, they must have a real buzz. And the fact that you're doing something which, is really quite difficult and people are achieving it, the buzz that comes from that and the community that comes from that must be just absolutely amazing. Friends with Fergus Crawley, who's done the Celtman, who I've seen the video that he produced, and they were like, it was like fire if there was a big like performance before they even started, it would just look absolutely incredible. So I can imagine that the community with that, the people watching and the athletes just must be really quite something special.
Yeah, and Fergus Crawley's video is definitely a great video if anybody wants to check out the Celtman and see what it's like. Some of the footage that he got, it really just it showcases what the event is like and what the atmosphere is like.
Definitely. Did you prepare differently for the Norseman in comparison to the Celtman, or?
So I had decided to enter the Celtman. So I knew that I was going to be doing Norseman 2022 last year. But what I didn't want was this kind of, the whole year is focused around Norseman. It's in August. It's a bit later in the summer. So I decided, I'll just enter Celtman again. And I'll just make Celtman my focus. And I'll focus on Celtman and then I'll deal with Norseman when it comes around. So really I only had 4 to 6 weeks where I thought about Norseman after Celtman was done, and I had maybe 2-week recovery. And at that point, I'd done barely any flat running, and that was probably the one thing that I was concerned about, that first part of the run. So I think I did like one half marathon, flat half marathon on like a Tuesday after work, 3 weeks before, and I was like, oh yeah, there we go, that's the flat running done. I can do it. Hopefully it'll be fine. So there was a little bit of there was quite a lot of unknown with the Norseman, but one of the biggest unknowns would be how I would cope with that flat running, just considering I hadn't trained for it. And to be honest, I wouldn't have wanted to train for it because it's not the type of running that I enjoy. And as I've said before, I think for me, it's all about doing something that's enjoyable. And there's also some injury risks as well when you're kind of trying to go fast on hard ground. So it was kind of a decision that I made on the outset that I wasn't necessarily going to focus on that. And in the end, it was fine, really. So
all works. So
yeah.
Do you deal with cold very well? Or I know you talked about you go to particular parts of Scotland with your dad, and you're going into freezing cold water with the seals. Is that your cold training? And do you find that type of training really helps you with these events?
So I'm quite lucky in that I do probably deal with the cold quite well compared to other people. I'm a stronger build than maybe what most would expect. I sometimes get people saying, "Oh, really? You've done the Norseman?" So I think Luke can be deceiving a little bit, and sometimes it actually helps to have a little bit more weight on you because it gives you that strength and that extra warmth that you actually need. And then it comes back to just getting outside when the weather is rubbish. And particularly, in winter we can have hard weather, but I never run on a treadmill inside, no matter what the weather. I have a head torch. I love getting outside and in the woods, the forest, and it's kind of that mindset again. It's, you've got maybe a training session to do, but it's a bit slushy outside, or it's a bit rainy, or for some reason you can't do that training session. Well, for me, I would always say it's still better to get outside and do something rather than to try and maybe adapt and do something inside on a treadmill. And maybe for a different event, that would not be the best thing to do, but for the likes of Celtman and Norseman, where you're almost training for that unknown as well, I think it is quite a good attitude to have. And then getting out on the bike in the winter, which can be pretty grim, and it can be cold. Cold feet are probably the worst. But just add in a cafe stop. Have coffee and cake. There's always that. Make it enjoyable for yourself.
That's a great recommendation. So, struggle with a cold? Cake. Put cake halfway through your bike. Put coffee in there. Sorted. Did you have cake and coffee in the event, like the halfway point?
I didn't, but my guy Robin Downey, who came second the past 2 years, he's a very good friend of mine, and he has I think it's chocolate brownie made by Helen, who's local to Lochcarron, which is very close to Shieldaig and where Celtman is. So he recommends brownie. I'm not sure. Chocolate for me mid things isn't necessarily so good, but maybe one that I should consider.
I could see myself doing well with a brownie halfway through that. And probably at the beginning as well. Just keep the brownies coming for me. I might need them. That's how I enjoyed the training, just the food.
Well, there you go.
How do you qualify for the Norseman? Is it very similar to the Celtman, where you've got to put your name in a ballot?
So there's two ways. You can put your name in the ballot, but you can also qualify if you are top two at Celtman or any other X-Tri event. So X-Tri is a series, a bit like Ironman, where the Celtman and Norseman are part of these events. And I should also say that they have a new system called X Points, where if you do a certain number of races, you can gather points, and then the points allow you to bypass the ballot. So, for example, you would be able to get into Norsman rather than having to put your name in the ballot. So for people who have been putting their names in the ballot for Norsman for 10 years' time, it's a great way of doing other incredible races in really amazing places, but also bypassing the ballot and getting a spot in the race.
Are you thinking of doing any of the other X-Tri events? Anything on the bucket list?
So I went to Montenegro last year to do one of the solo 0.5, so the kind of the half distance events that they have, and I would really recommend it. It was amazing. I've never been to Montenegro before. I didn't know what to expect. The scenery was amazing. The people were amazing, and one of my friends wants to do the full Black Lake Triathlon, which is the Montenegro event next year. So I've agreed to support her for that. And then the other one, which I really like the look at, well, there's two actually. There's one in Slovakia, called Janosik, which looks amazing and has a very technical run. But there's also one in Livigno, I think that's how you say it, in Italy, which looks amazing. But I think for me now, it's just about finding the rhythm, finding the routine, building on it day by day by day, and let's see how we go next year and kind of evaluate then.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll put X-Tri and any type of promotional material for them in our show notes. So anyone that's interested, and I'm sure many people listening will be after hearing this, definitely find that and click it and check out as many of these events as possible. To finish off, these are obviously all extreme events, but if you had to speak to someone for the first time and convince them to do one, what would you say to them? Like, what would you do to convince someone to do an extreme triathlon?
I think I'd start with convincing them to get outside and do some hill running or hill walking, or getting on a bike. I think that hill running and hill walking and just being outside, having the fresh air against your skin, and it's just so good for the mind, for the body. We spend so much time looking at screens, working with laptops, and being outside and giving yourself that time to reset every day is so important and just makes you feel so much better. And then I love running and hill walking, but cycling is even better in some ways because you can explore even more. It's just a faster version of running. You get to see so much more, and then you can add in coffee and cake. I mean, I think the way I would convince someone would really be to convincing them to embrace the lifestyle, because that's what it is. To do these events, it's about embracing that kind of lifestyle, and otherwise you're just not going to enjoy it. And coffee and cake and lots of food. If you're doing lots of exercise, then you can have lots of nice food as well. So that's always a good way of convincing people. It's definitely a good way of convincing me.
Yeah, definitely. Food and adventure. That's the best way to think.
What more could you want?
Exactly. Food and adventure. Get that on a t-shirt. Eilidh, that was perfect. That was amazing. If anyone wants to follow you on social media, or if they have any questions, where can they find your stuff?
Yeah, I have on Instagram. I'm Venture with EP. That's my Instagram, and you can send me a message. I'm also on Strava. I am private, but it's really only so people from work don't follow me and complain when I run for more than an hour or do something longer at lunch. So you can also follow me on Strava as well, and I share most things. On there. I'm not secretive about what I do or anything like that. And if you do have any questions, then you can always send me a message on Instagram. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Well, I'll be keeping a lookout on your social media to see how the training is going leading up to the next Celtman. You'll be brilliant. Well, thank you so much. That was brilliant.
Thanks very much for having me.